Hadouken!
With the enormous success of the incredible film Across the Spider-Verse, I figured now would be a good time to take a look at some of Spider-Man's video game adventures. Since the Miles Morales version of Spider-Man is a relatively newer character, he hasn't made many appearances in video games, although there is a PlayStation exclusive title that features Miles Morales, and the character plays a prominent role in the upcoming Spider-Man 2 PS5 game. Due to this newer version of the Web-Slinger's limited appearances in video games, we're going to focus on one of the titles featuring the Peter Parker version of Spider-Man instead. Spider-Man has made quite a few appearances in video games over the years. In fact, the wall crawler has starred in a video game for almost every console ever created. He has also headlined his own arcade game and made numerous appearances as a playable character in quite a few fighting games as well. On this edition of the Classic Game Showcase, we're going to swing all the way back to 1982 and check out the first ever video game to feature Spider-Man as we play Spider-Man on the Atari 2600. Spider-Man has always been one of my favorite characters. As a kid, I gobbled up every bit of Spider-Man media available to me. I love the comic books. I read the daily newspaper strip. I watched the Electric Company waiting for the segments featuring Spider-Man, and every Saturday morning I spent some time with Spider-Man and his amazing friends. My mind was officially blown when I stumbled across an ad for an upcoming video game featuring Spider-Man on the back of a comic book. This title was available for the Atari 2600, which is extremely dated by today's standards, but was a phenomenon in the early 80s. It was also the first home video game console that my family owned, and while the specs for the system were not on par with the technology used on popular arcade titles at the time, it was still a treat to be able to play versions of these games in the comfort of your own home. I didn't have to wait long to get my hands on this game, as it showed up underneath my Christmas tree that year, and while I loved playing it as a child, I wonder if my fondness for this title is based on the actual game, or just the nostalgia from my childhood. Let's take a more in-depth look at this game and see what it's all about. Spider-Man for the Atari 2600 is a vertical scrolling action game released by Parker Brothers in 1982. Parker Brothers was a big deal at the time, as they were responsible for publishing some of the most popular board games ever. Clue, Monopoly, Sorry, Risk, and Trivial Pursuit were just a few of their products. This titan of toys and games produced numerous memorable titles for the Atari 2600, such as home ports of Popeye and Frogger, as well as the first video games based on Star Wars. Gameplay on Spider-Man is very similar to the arcade game Crazy Climber, which was released in 1980. Players take control of Spider-Man as he attempts to scale a building and defuse the bombs that the Green Goblin has planted throughout. Spider-Man has a finite supply of web fluid to achieve his goal, which is indicated by a meter at the bottom of the screen. This meter also works as a timer, and Spidey's supply of web fluid slowly depletes as time passes. An empty web fluid meter will cause our hero to fall to his demise and one of his lives will be lost, and once a player has no lives, it's game over. Spider-Man uses his webs to move up the building vertically or diagonally as the Green Goblin's minions randomly pop out of windows and attempt to cut his webs. If the bad guys manage to cut his webs, Spidey will plummet to the ground below, and it will take quick reflexes to shoot another web line in time for him to save himself. Spider-Man can capture these criminals merely by making physical contact with them, and any time he captures a criminal, Spidey recovers a little bit of web fluid. After a certain point, the layout of each building changes to a series of girders in which the Green Goblin has planted a bunch of small bombs. When a bomb is about to explode, its color changes, and defusing these bombs before they detonate gives Spider-Man a bit of extra web fluid as well. Once Spidey reaches the top of the building, he must face off against the Green Goblin, who has planted a super bomb at the top of the building. Once the fuse is lit, there's a limited amount of time to reach the bomb before it detonates. The Green Goblin can be defeated simply by avoiding him and defusing the bomb, and once our hero saves the day, the level restarts at a higher difficulty. The graphics of this title are extremely simplistic, but players can easily tell the difference between Spider-Man, the Green Goblin, and the criminals in the windows. There is no music in this title and very few sound effects aside from Spider-Man's webs or the sound of him falling to his doom. This was an Atari 2600 title after all, and since the system was pretty basic, graphics and sound like this were par for the course. After playing this game now, I believe the reason I enjoyed it so much as a kid was that I had nothing to compare it to. Spider-Man on the Atari 2600 was not only the first ever Spider-Man game, it was also the first video game based on any Marvel property. This title is fun for about 5 minutes, but then it becomes extremely repetitive, and the finicky controls can make even the most patient gamer want to throw their controller across the room. With its simplistic graphics and repetitive gameplay, this game is ultimately very forgettable, and its legacy can be based on the fact that it's the first Spider-Man video game, ever. But here's a fun fact. This game holds a bit of relevance in modern times as eagle-eyed fans can spot the Atari 2600 version of the Green Goblin as an Easter egg in Across the Spider-Verse. If you're looking to play a retro game featuring the Amazing Spider-Man, I strongly suggest checking out Spider-Man on the Sega Genesis or Spider-Man 2 on the PlayStation 2 instead. Until next time.